When you think about funny people, a lot of them aren't that funny. No, they are, but they're not fun to be around. They're not happy. And Fran Lebowitz screams out as being one of those morose, fascinating people. You know, we're pain in the asses. The way we are able to tell the stories of our miseries. And I'm saying "are," so I guess I'm one of these poor, miserable bastards. Fran Lebowitz really is. You can see it on her later with Bob Costas' interview from February 18th, 1992. I always get the sense I grew up with this woman.
Thanks for staying up later, which is what Fran Lebowitz has done. She's been on the Letterman show a million times, and she stays a half hour longer tonight to join us. Her books are Metropolitan Life and Social Studies, and working on a novel to be called Exterior Signs of Wealth. And it's not a working title. We know for sure that's going to be the title.
Yes, that's definitely the title, because that's the part that's finished. I don't want to have to go back and redo that.
So, as you pointed out, you've been famous longer than one would think someone who has only these 2 slim volumes would have been famous. I mean, you've ridden these 2 slim volumes for quite a while.
Yes. Fairly bumpy ride, however.
You told me you got an hour's sleep.
An hour and 5 minutes.
Oh, an hour for the 5 minutes, I guess, is important. Proportionally, 5 minutes would be important if you only slept an hour.
That's right. Any more, I would be sluggish.
But now you're kind of perky.
I have the perfect amount of sleep.
When do you usually sleep?
Now. I prefer to sleep in the daytime, but I don't always get the opportunity, because sometimes I have to go out during what I think of as adult working hours.
In one of your earlier essays, you pointed out that you usually wake up about 1:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes, that's in an ideal world. Actually, I wake up whenever they start drilling. You know, my sleeping happens pretty much at the whim of Con Edison or cable television or whoever is drilling in the street. But when I'm not in New York and I'm in a place where there's not constant drilling, I like to sleep in the daytime. I prefer to sleep in the daytime. I find the daytime a more restful sleeping environment.
And then at night?
At night, I perk up, or as perky as I get.
And is this about as perky as you get? Because I've studied this...
This is it, pretty much. This is me on speed.
You know, I studied this fairly closely in your many appearances on Letterman and other places, and I'm looking for some strange jump in the graph where all of a sudden you become like Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain, just some spontaneous outburst of gaiety and festive behavior, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yes, you have.
I have?
Yes, that's my festive behavior.
This is it?
This is it.
What does this indicate about you, do you think?
What do you mean? Do you find kind of a morose quality in me, do you?
Well, I don't know. You could be morose while still amusing the rest of us. You don't make me feel morose. I don't know if you are, though.
I think that's not uncommon to people who other people find amusing. You know, I don't know what the cause of it is. It could be just my nature. It could be 5,000 years of Jewish history. I'm not sure what it is.
It's a terrible burden to carry.
Yes, it is. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's not that I don't feel... People often accuse me of being down, negative. I think of it as being just realistic.
Sort of like little Alvy Singer in Annie Hall, where he tells the psychiatrist, look, the universe is expanding, and in X number of billions of years, it's going to explode. And he says, but Alvy, we're here in Brooklyn right now. None of us can live long enough to see it happen. Perk up.
I remember, and his mother says to him something like, what business is it of yours? You live in Brooklyn.
Right.
No, I don't have that type of personality at all. I think it doesn't bother me the way I am. It seems maybe to bother other people, but it doesn't bother me. You know, I'm not depressed. I'm just, I'm not full of false good cheer.
And you find most good cheer to be on the false side?
I would think in an adult it would be false, or they're not paying attention. You know, I understand in children because they don't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what is before them. But for adults, I find either they're not paying attention or it's false.
You wrote a very amusing story once about how adults should deal with children. And I can't remember all the particulars, but there were things that, do's and don'ts for how to treat
pros
you.
and cons.
Yeah.
It was pros and cons of children in general. You know, like, so kind of the way that Consumer Reports rates a car. You know, it was, and it wasn't for buying children, but it was, or it wasn't really directions in that sense, but it was my opinion. But I prefer children to adults.
You do?
Yes, people expect me to dislike children because people sometimes confuse me with different sort of moroseness, like, say, W.C. Fields.
Right.
But I'm actually quite fond of children. I prefer them to adults.
So actually, you part ways only 50% with W.C. Fields. He didn't like kids, and he didn't like animals. You like kids, but you don't want any pets.
No, I don't like animals. Well, I like them in the past tense. You know, like, I wear boots. You know,
Right.
I like sparrows. But that's pretty much my animal loving. Yes, I do. I like children. Because children don't do the most irritating things that adults do. They do their own irritating things, but they're very minor. They don't start trends. You know, they don't make awful movies that last for 3.5 hours. You know, basically, I find them companionable.
How tough was your own adolescence?
It was awful, I have to say. I mean, it's the good thing about having a terrible adolescence, which, by the way, I think is common, ordinary. I think most people have it. I think it's an awful time of life.
I hated it with a passion that if I think about it for even 5 minutes now, it ruins my day.
Yes, it's the worst time of life. I think in any given high school, there are only 2 people who are enjoying their adolescence. You know, one is the captain of the football team, the other one is his girlfriend.
Right.
And that's it. I was neither of these people. So I did not enjoy my adolescence. And I don't enjoy the company of adolescents now. I feel they should live in a different state. I think one state should be set aside, one of the less populous states.
Wyoming, maybe?
Wyoming, right? Clear it of the 3 or 4 adults that live there now. Let them move somewhere else and move all the teenagers there, which I think would be a boon to everyone. Teenagers hate their parents. They wouldn't have, they could live with each other, annoy each other, and we wouldn't have to deal with them. This is my proposal.
So now you must be at least among the most famous graduates of your high school class, right?
I'm actually not a graduate of my high school class since I was expelled from high school.
You were expelled?
Yes, which would make me pretty much not a graduate.
Well, yeah, that
I
would...
may be certainly the most famous expellee of my high school class.
What led to this expulsion?
You know, it was a private school where they don't have to tell you. You know, in public school, they can't kick you out now unless maybe you behead a teacher. Even then, I think...
There's a review board that...
Right, you'd have the law on your side. You could wrestle up a protest. But in private school, they can kick you out for just being not their type, which is basically, I think, what it was. I think it was a really kind of excessive and exceptional surliness on my part.
How would it manifest itself?
Well, in what people now think of as my moroseness, maybe, or my deadpan quality, they felt was... I was not a team player. I wasn't festive enough for them.
What kind of school was it?
It was a very small, deservedly small, Episcopalian girls' school.
Uh-huh.
And you could be, and I was suspended for wearing loafers to chapel. You're supposed to wear pumps to chapel. I would forget which days were chapel. It would slip my mind.
Now, I had always taken it that you were Jewish.
Yes, I am Jewish. But
Well, what were you doing at an Episcopalian girls' school?
this was actually the only school in the area in which I lived that took Jews. That's what I was doing in that school. This was before equal opportunity.
Well, it was kind of an ecumenical philosophy that prevailed there. You got to give them credit for that.
It was a kind of tokenism, which was not practiced by any other. There were only, you know, I lived in a small town. There were only a few girls' schools.
There wasn't any one incident, one straw that broke the camel's back?
No, there was none. I wish there was, because, of course, it would make a better story, but there wasn't.
How did they break the news to you?
They called my house. Well, of course, it wasn't my house. You always say my house, but, you know, if you're 16, it's not your house at all.
Right.
They called my parents' house. I happened to be home from school that day, suffering from a kind of Moliere-like flu. And my mother also happened to be home, which was not usual because she worked then. And they just called and said, "You're fired."
You're fired.
Right. That's it. I was a few days after the tuition, non-refundable tuition had been paid, so they were...
Uh-huh. And you never went anywhere else? You decided that's the end?
Oh, I didn't decide. I mean, there were lots of places lined up asking for me, you know.
Recruiting you?
Right. Now, that was the last time I went to school.
So you're not a high school graduate?
Well, I have a high school equivalency diploma.
Did you do it through the mail?
Which you can imagine how useful that is. No, I went to night school. You know, you have to go to, like, night classes or something like that, and then you take a test, and I have this diploma. It's actually pasted onto my refrigerator at my apartment.
So when did you start writing?
Oh, I think when I was a really small child. You know, when I learned to read, 5 or 6, like that. You know, not essays, but fairly opinionated stuff, considering how short I was at the time.
Like, yeah, and when you're short, you have to muster up a lot more courage to express
That's
yourself.
right. Well, when you're 5 or 6, you're only a few feet tall.
That's a good point.
That's right. Even I was pretty much the same height then.
Did you sprouted early and then leveled off?
That's it.
You were kind of a giant as a kid, and then...
No, I was actually, there's a person that I went to grammar school with who I've always been very grateful to for being like a quarter of an inch shorter than me, so I was not the shortest person in my class. She was a tiny bit shorter than I was.
Didn't you write a story I read somewhere, I don't know if it was ever published, but sort of like a Nancy Drew type mystery novel?
Yes, I did. It was a kind of unconscious homage. to Nancy Drew? Well, because those were the books I was reading at the time. You know, I was quite fanatic about Nancy Drew. And I wrote a book in a loose leaf notebook in pencil called The Secret Castle. And the thing I most remember about it was that I just announced one day, it was on a Sunday, that I was going to go upstairs and write a book. And I started writing the book, and then I came downstairs to read it to my parents. And it was a kidnapping, but very much Nancy Drew type kidnapping.
Yeah.
No blood was spilled. No ransom was even requested. And it took place in a grocery store. I didn't really have a lot of travel references at the time. And it took place in a grocery store, and the grocer's name was Mr. Claywood. And my father asked me, "Where did you get that name?" And for a second, and I had made it up, for a second I thought, I panicked because I thought you weren't allowed to do that. That was like a lie. And I thought if I told my father I made it up, I would be punished for having made this up, which was making up a lie. But I couldn't think of where else I got it from, so I said, I made it up. And he said, oh. And then I waited to be yelled at, and he didn't yell at me. That was a literary encouragement I got at home.
So now, the kidnapping takes place in the grocery store.
In the grocery store. Well, these little boys come into, although I didn't think of them as little boys at the time, since they were 10, they seemed to me like older men. And they heard a noise in the basement of the grocery store. It was a grocery store as opposed to a giant supermarket. And that's where the kidnapped victim was tied up downstairs.
So they pretty much nabbed her in produce and took her all the way to the basement.
Yes, the kidnapped victim was also a boy.
Also a boy?
Yes, all the people, most of the people in the book were boys. This was in a way I was trying to distinguish myself, make myself different from Nancy Drew.
But then you, I imagine you or someone representing you.
I was not in the book.
You weren't in it?
No.
No extension of you in it?
It was not autobiographical. Even then, I was trying to have a little detachment about things.
If you could influence mass behavior, what is it that you find out there as you wander through New York that you would most like to change or at least modify in some way if people would just listen to you?
Oh, there's nothing I wouldn't want to change. In other words, I find nothing to my satisfaction right now. I can't think of a single thing. And every day, no matter what encounter I have with what I would call, say, the general public, which would mean even buying a newspaper, taking the subway, whatever it is, the worst aspect of the fact that you're constantly dealing with people who are hostile, incompetent, etc., is that they are allowed to vote.
Yeah.
You know, or when you see mass kind of stupid behavior, you know, you watch something on TV, some kind of gigantic event like some kind of giant rock concert where people are tearing the place apart, or people standing in line to go see Wheel of Fortune or something like that. You look and you think, these people are allowed to vote.
And not only that, most are capable of breeding.
Yes, and this is the downside of a democracy.
Now, what's more annoying? Making your way through the proletariat, buying the newspaper, picking up a pretzel on the street corner, riding the subway? Do you find more annoyance in that, or do you find more annoyance in high society, which I guess you were introduced into to some extent after your books were successful?
I find an equal amount of annoyance. I'm a kind of very egalitarian in my ability to be annoyed by people. I find most people annoying. It matters not to me what class they're in at all. You know, they're just different kinds of annoyance. I think you're more annoyed in what you call high society. There really isn't much left, but because you feel that they have a choice not to behave that way, that someone might have told them not to. You know, I mean, you understand that people will behave badly on the double R. Even the person with the best disposition in the world, after 5 minutes on that train, would be in a mood that you could understand to be murderous.
Sure.
When people who don't have to do those things are still annoying, I think I blame them more, I'd have to say.
Wasn't there a period of time, either because you wanted to or because you were a double agent and thought it would be an interesting way to gather material, where you spent a considerable amount of time at some ritzy parties or at Studio 54 or places like that?
I still do, not Studio 54, since it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
People thought I was gathering material because I guess that would be the more respectable reason for being there. I was being there mostly because, funnily enough, I would prefer to be at a party than sitting alone at a desk staring at blank paper. You know?
Well, it's an understandable urge, but there are parties and then there are parties.
Well, if I'm going to go to a party, I would prefer to be at a party, say, where I'm drinking out of a real glass.
As opposed to a Dixie cup?
Right, I'm funny that way. Well, people used to say, you know, you don't hang out with, you know, why don't you hang out with writers? Why do you hang out with shoe designers? And I said they have better parties. You know, they have more money. So they have better parties. You get better stuff, and it's a nicer environment. I'm quite a lotus eater. So mostly I go to parties for reasons of hedonism, although it's hard to find much pleasure in parties anymore.
Why?
Oh, I think numbers of reasons. I may be too old. You may have like a party limit. Like, you know, supposedly you have only a certain number of beats in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
If you use them up by being excited or eating bacon or whatever uses them up, then you die younger.
I hadn't heard this theory, that it's an actual number of beats.
Right, your heart is capable of a certain number of beats, apparently. I don't know if this is true or not. You may be capable of only enjoying a certain number of parties. I may have gone over my limit, say, by 1971. I feel that was a possibility. So that may be the reason, but I think that parties, of course, become less fun as our environment becomes much less entertaining one.
Are you still in demand, though?
As a party guest,
Yeah.
I would say that I'm...
Still on the A-list?
Still in demand as a party guest. Because people, you know, as long as you're not saying anything about them, they want to hear what you have to say. And they never notice that they're going to move away and the next person's going to sit down, and who do they think you'll talk about then?
So they're just looking for some good gossip, some good repartee.
I don't think gossip. I'm not really much of a gossip. I'm not that interested in other people.
Acerbic observations is what they want.
Right.
But
These
aren't
people
they...
who are gossips are really interested in other people to an extent that I'm not. I can't even remember gossip. You could tell me the same gossip 3 days in a row, and each time I'll be surprised.
Don't you find that intellectual pretension is far more annoying than blatant ignorance?
Oh, much more.
I mean, you can forgive someone for ignorance.
There's not even a comparison. There's not even comparison. Of course, there's pretension is maybe the worst character trait anyone could have. And
Found in abundance, everywhere you go.
Not everywhere you go, but certainly everywhere you go around here. Yes.
Around here as in this studio, or around here as in New York?
This city, I meant.
What are the most egregious examples?
To me, I would say the worst example is what happened maybe in the 80s, which was that people became obsessed with certain things which they elevated to the level of culture, say. In other words, all of a sudden there were a lot of people talking about furniture. And this would give the knowledge about furniture would enable them to give the impression that they were cultivated. Now, of course,
Yeah.
it's much easier to be able to distinguish between various styles of furniture than it is to actually be cultivated. And so this passed for cultivation. So you had all these people, for instance, going to sales at Sotheby's, talking about furniture. This food, too, the same thing. You know, people who knew every single kind of mushroom in the world. This is easy to know. You know, this is much easier than learning long division, which every 8-year-old has to learn. That type of thing, which took the place. Intellectual pretension is something that now most people don't even know to pretend. That's practically gone because people are so illiterate.
What about yourself annoys you? What would you want to change about yourself, if anything?
I've never thought about this. What annoys me about myself? I don't annoy myself. I can't say, God, I'm so annoyed. She talks when I want to sleep, or, I mean, what could I say? I want to say I don't annoy myself. You mean, is there anything about myself I'd like to change? Is that what you mean?
Maybe that's a better question.
Well, yes, I would like to be younger and taller and richer. Otherwise, I'm perfectly content with the way I am.
So if you were younger and taller and richer, but could maintain...
Well, I used to be younger and richer, but I was never taller. So maybe the tallness is the thing that I would like to experience.
Do people say this to you? I thought you were taller?
Yes, always.
Because we had never met. I'd seen you on television many times. I'd read your work. We had never met until today. And I was a little surprised that you weren't taller. But people say that to me all the time.
Always. People always say to me, I thought you were tall. I'm surprised people say it to you because I always thought the reason people say it to me is they feel that a woman would not risk saying the things that I said unless she was tall. I always think that's the reason that people say it. But people always say to me, I thought you were tall, and they're very disappointed. I don't know why, and I've asked people, are you disappointed? Yes. Why? Did you want me to play basketball? I mean, what would be the use to you if I was taller?
Yeah.
But see, I have a little sister who is 5'10". I'm not 5'10".
You're what, 5'3", 5'4"?
5'4". Well, I used to be 5'4". I might be a little shorter now, but... So I've been always annoyed by having to have a younger sister, and she's quite a bit younger than I am, almost 4 years. To have a younger sister who's taller than you when you're a child is very irritating.
And we're back with Fran Lebowitz. This new book is not like the other two, a collection of essays and observations. It's a novel, right?
It's a novel, although it's a collection of observations, but not of essays, yes.
I would imagine. Is it coming slowly?
Well, ostensibly, I've been writing this book for 10 years. Now, that's not illegitimate. Many books have been took that long to write, but I don't want to give people the impression that I've been writing this book for 10 years. I have to say that I took 7 or 8 years off.
In a stretch, or?
Pretty much in a stretch, yes.
Yeah.
So I've actually only been working on the book for about 2 years, which is a very short period of time.
Now, what is recreate for us your work-a-day life? What's an average day for Fran Lebowitz?
I don't have an average day. If I did, I would have written many books. Because routine and discipline are the hallmarks of productivity, as you may have noticed in life.
Yeah.
So, but when I'm trying to write, I go through periods where I decide I'm going to be disciplined, and I try to sit at the desk, say, 4 hours a day. Doesn't matter which 4 hours. But I tend to write at night. It's an old habit and not a useful one anymore, because now that I'm getting on in years, I can't do it. But when I was very young, when I lived at home, when I was a child, I would write at night, because the rest of the time I had to go to school and Girl Scouts and stuff like that. So now I think, why are you writing at 4 o'clock in the morning? You don't have to go to school tomorrow. But it kind of hangs on, this habit.
When is this book going to be completed, do you think?
Within the century.
Well, in this case, that would only mean 8 years.
No, I think it'll be finished in about a year. See, it depends what day you ask me. If you ask me a day where I got a lot of work done, I'll say a week. You know, if you ask me in a dry stretch, I would say, I don't know. But I think in about a year, it'll be finished.
So you didn't do badly here for an hour and 5 minutes of sleep.
Oh, thank you.
You know, you look actually remarkably well for someone who only had an hour and 5 minutes.
It's just flattering lighting.
We did what we could for you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
See you later.